Almost Famous Enough is a proud sponsor of Music Day in Canada. Music Day in Canada is a national campaign and celebration created by the Lemon Foundation to spotlight the people, places, and communities that power Canadian music. Through live events, artist showcases, community partnerships, and digital storytelling, the campaign uplifts Canadian talent and supports the sustainability of local music ecosystems. The campaign is open to everyone, from venues and artists to brands and fans, with each region contributing its own voice to the national story. Check out musicdayincanada.com or look for the link in our podcast notes of each episode. Okay, can we talk about what we're really doing here? I mean, like really talk about what this thing is about. This podcast, this reason for conversations to keep happening. Is this a terrible way to start a podcast early in a new season? I was prepping the night before this conversation that I had and recording with Peter Dreams, the solo moniker for Peter Dreimanis of the Canadian alt-rock band July Talk. And I couldn't shake the question, what am I doing this for? Stemming from the particular question of, what am I trying to get out of this conversation? I was struck by the dynamic I was going into, where someone like Peter is going from interview to interview, sitting across from people who have all the information about him, and it's not a balanced conversation. I wanted balance. I didn't want to talk about all the things I can already know about him. I wanted to talk about what I didn't know yet, and it felt like this is what it was all supposed to be about. And Peter delivered. He was immediately charismatic, affable, relaxed, open, and authentic. Those eyes that seem like so piercing in pictures and videos are actually widely invitational. There was darkness and layers in the movements, the confessions, but somewhat overshadowed by an upbeat humility and self-awareness. I was warmed, educated, inspired. I thought I had gotten to know the Peter I didn't know yet. But how much can you know about somebody in an hour? I was invited to see this hall show, a throwback style gig a couple nights later with Peter and Moon River, his backing band and recording partners for his recent solo project. Can we just talk about what this thing is all about? Sometimes I think I'm doing a bunch of things to make this thing. But sometimes this thing is doing a bunch of things to me. Attending this local sold-out community hall gig for Peter Dreams, an Edmonton boy who went off into the world and made his hometown proud with July Talk, 3 Junos Awards, multiple top 10 rock radio hits from 4 studio albums. This show felt like I had been invited by a new friend to come to his house for Thanksgiving. And so I go thinking I know exactly what Thanksgiving is, but then I arrive and it's not just him and his family, it's the entire neighborhood showing up to dinner, and it's no longer a room I can just blend into, but I'm too dumbstruck by the context of the moment to notice. The context being that you never actually know the things about someone that aren't already written, the unknown things that I wanted to know, until you see someone with their people, their family. This was all the context I needed to understand Peter Dreams. You would never know at any moment of that night that this man has been approaching Canadian rock royalty and recently been a part of one of Hollywood's coolest films of the year, Sinners, with Michael B. Jordan. Sometimes you don't know why you're really doing something until you just do. My name is Glen Erickson. This is Almost Famous Enough. Thank you for spending your time with us. This is Peter Dreams. So you're like coming from Sonic, and was that just like a taped thing or a live thing?
The taped thing was just to set up K-Days and hear catch up. We've been in and out of that station for
years and years
or something like that.
Well, that's where I've always heard you guys. Like, song after song after song.
So great,
right? Yeah. And they like to keep winning all the awards for alt rock, I think, in the country radio things all the time. And great people, admittedly.
Yeah, always.
But so you're here 6 days early for, is that a family thing?
5 days late.
Maybe so.
Yeah, I'm here
So,
for
like
2 weeks. So it just kind of kept ballooning and being able to see family. I got a kid to kind of connect with the Alberta fam, and they often come east to Toronto to just like do the opposite. And it's important to me that like my kid knows Alberta.
Yeah.
Like has that experience. I can already feel it just arriving. Last time we were here, I mean, they were only like maybe one, and it was February, and to be here in the summer, now a bit older, it's super special. But then I also have these solo gigs. So I'm going tomorrow. We play Calgary.
Okay,
with this Peter Dreams project.
Yeah.
The guys in Moon River play as my backing band. They fly into Calgary tomorrow.
Okay.
So we come in, play tomorrow in Calgary, and then Friday we book Richie Hall, which I'm like very excited about.
Wow, that's a throwback.
I mean, we were kind of like just talking about this before, but I feel like there just didn't really seem to be a venue in Edmonton. And last time we kind of got screwed. I won't talk about ill will about the venue, but it just was like a bad layout. And I felt like, half the people that came to the show couldn't really see the stage. And I just felt a bit like next time I want to do something a bit more DIY, a bit more. And so I grew up going to hall shows.
Yeah.
One was kind of close to here, Queen Alex Hall. I don't know if it still goes.
Yeah.
For community
I think
stuff.
so.
But I saw some of my kind of most formative shows there.
I watched a Richie Hall show I guess it was feels like a few months ago. Maybe it was a bit more, but pretty recently.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited about
it.
Do our own bar and just be like,
that's the DIY, right?
Like, and Moon River's manager is this guy, Jesse Northey. Do you know Jesse?
Oh, very well.
Yeah. So Jesse is like a really close old bud of ours. July Talk played with Jesse's band in Lethbridge when he was still living in Lethbridge in like 2013 or something. So we've always kind of like
that goes
been in
way
each
back.
other's orbit. And so he's managing Moon River now, and Moon River has.
So that's the show. He's making all his posts trying to find somebody who knows maybe how to do security.
Is that what it was?
Security?
Yeah. So he's been putting it all together. Emily Baczynski's doing sound, who I went to school with.
Oh, really?
And knew her brother really well and her sister. And, there's like a bunch of people. Billy Zizi's on the bill, who I grew up across the street from, like literally across the street. Jordan.
Still playing. Yeah.
And so, it's going to be like, you know what I mean? You can tell what we're after. I think we're just after like more of a community experience than like trying to sell bar tabs.
So,
you know what I mean? Like,
that's pretty amazing.
I mean, as a July Talk thing, you kind of get shocked as like this like Live Nation Ticketmaster band a bit. Like sometimes you get taken out of that kind of more community feel.
Yeah. Well, because you don't have your hands in that.
No, you kind of have to play the game. Like,
yeah.
Like if I want to get July Talk a good show in Richmond, Virginia, it's helpful for me to play the game when we play in, Toronto or like one of our cities where we can bring a crowd, Edmonton, whatever. Yeah. And so as a result, you're kind of always leveraging spots where you have a deep community and you end up doing shows that are more through those kind of giant multinational corporations. You miss out on doing kind of fun community stuff like this.
Yeah, that's really great.
So Peter Dreams has been a good opportunity for me to be able to do more of that stuff.
Well, let's just talk about that and jump in right there. Like, obviously, like I often like to go back to the beginning with people, set some stage and context. But so your beginning is here in Edmonton, which is very cool, which already gives me a lot to talk about. I'm sure every time you talk to somebody in Edmonton, that becomes a little bit thematic in the conversation, but you don't seem opposed to it.
Not at all.
But obviously, so your career was like getting things going in Edmonton, making a jump to Toronto. You meet Leia there.
Yeah.
You form July Talk, kind of rest is history in a way, right? Like over a decade of like album releases, like 4 full lengths, the first 3 all win Grammys or Junos, and like radio single after radio single in Canada. And, for the state of radio, I feel like the alt rock sort of like charting, or at least that system inside of Canada, is pretty strong and healthy and has some impact for bands. So you have this arc, but it starts in Edmonton, which I'm interested in because we already talked about it briefly, like the pawn shop showed you that photo of your first July Talk. But before that, you had been here. There had been the venues where you saw bands all the time. I'm curious when you were here, sort of still informative years, better for worse, who were the ones you were trying to emulate? Who were you seeing in venues? What was your like North Star?
Yeah.
That made you want to do this?
Like, I think that I was a music fan first and foremost when I lived in Edmonton. I was a film guy. Like when I was in high school, I got deeply just fell in love with filmmaking. I got involved at FAVA and went to Vic Comp where they had a film program, and this guy Steve Ashworth, who was teaching, who was really putting kids in the position to succeed. And I was very fortunate to be in the center of that. So I made a bunch of film stuff coming out of high school. And, kind of my best friend at the time, or one of my best friends at the time, was Eamon McGrath, and he was really touring a lot in music. So he was doing music, I was doing film, and I was more focusing on trying to go to film school in Toronto. Wanted to go to California, and I remember going and at the bank, they were like, "We're not lending you." The California, so okay, Toronto it is. But yeah, it was, my experience as a music fan here in those years, always played guitar and keys and stuff. But, I think the North Star was often shows put on by Eli Klein. I don't know if you know Eli Klein, but he often put on great shows. Like locally, it was bands like Shout Out, 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 Out. And who else comes to mind? The Franklins were huge. Like sort of the punk rock scene. Like I said, Eamon McGrath and, the city streets were kind of these like outlaws that felt very like fun and dangerous.
Were you going to like New City Liquid Lounge?
New City, I guess when it was bands coming in town from elsewhere, it was often Eli putting the shows on.
Yeah.
And it would be like, the true North Star was the Constantines, particularly seeing them at Starlight Room with Attack in Black was like a super formative show for me. And then, seeing like two drummers playing with Shout Out, Out, Out. They played an all ages show at a venue that's like downtown Convocation Hall. No, maybe that's not what it's called. There's like some sort of public hall downtown, but kind of like heading towards the river valley. So I don't know, 250 cap or something like that. Anyway, two drummers playing together.
Yeah,
I was blown away, and like seeing bands like what Houston, all those bands at that time, when I was coming of age, were just extremely inspiring. But yeah, so I guess I took a trip to Toronto when I was like 11, and I like decided that I was gonna live there. I was just like very sure that was where I needed to go.
Yeah.
I never wanted to go to Vancouver. There was lots of other friends that were going west, and I just was always
it was a little easier
to go. I don't know why I wanted to so badly necessarily, but then I guess the reason why I ended up going was because I got involved with some filmmakers that lived in Toronto, and it gave me a shoe in, and allowed me to do it. And so my way to July Talk ultimately was through that. I started. I went to film school, was doing film work for music video bands, and then ended up quitting film school 2 years in debt, and decided that I just like it wasn't serving me, and I was done with school.
So you made that quit before the music thing had already
pretty much. I'd been playing a little bit of music here and there, but not really. And I was like 21 or 20, and I realized like I'm living beyond my means. I'm spending all this money on university that I don't really need. I'm working in the industry and kind of being taken away from working in film because of the school. And so me and my best friend at school, Josh, decided to quit together. And he was a bit older. He had a background in playing in bands prior and had gone back to film school. So we decided, well, let's start a music video production company. So we started a production company together, quit school, and did videos for, oh my God, like we must have done 2 or 3 dozen videos in the first year. Like it was just nutty, the amount of work we were doing together. We bought a camera and just went for it. In that phase where we were making like much fact-funded videos, which was a grant that was at the time available through Bell Media, where you would get, 10, 20 grand to make a music video. So we were making videos for Arkells and Tokyo Police Club and Born Ruffians and Silverstein and like all these like kind of Canadian bands. And I think through that, there was sort of, and then I started touring in Eamon McGrath's band because, he was coming to Toronto and touring out of Toronto. And I was, selling merch and just kind of being around that and really falling in love with the romance of the road. So in the midst of that, Josh and I are talking, and we were always kind of showing each other song ideas we had and stuff, but I'd never played live or like sang live, or done any of that. And at one point, I think we made a video that had taken us like 6 months, and we'd worked for what ended up being, $2 an hour or something insane. I think that the artist put it out, and I don't remember what exactly it was, but essentially I think it felt like they just didn't market it or didn't have any sort of like context around the project to support the video. And it ended up getting, 10,000 views and sitting on YouTube. And we felt we'd like, just put our blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. And I think that was a real changing moment where we kind of realized, like, I think we can do this. Like, we can do the band part too.
Yes.
And make all the videos. And we can have a project that is sort of supported, and like all the stuff that bands hate, like the branding, we actually kind of like. Like, we like making a project that feels all cohesive and all these little Easter eggs kind of attached to each other and whatever. So that was happening over here. And then simultaneously, I'm touring with Eamon and Danny, who's our drummer in July Talk, playing in Eamon's band and this band called the Mohawk Lodge from Vancouver. And so those two things are kind of happening simultaneously. And the Mohawk Lodge, Eamon McGrath situation completely falls apart in, early 20s excess of drinking too much and putting too many substances in the body. I meet Leah in a bar in Toronto, just like kind of by chance. I strolled into a bar after a particularly chaotic Eamon McGrath show, and I had written a tune that summer. The whole time we were touring at that era, I had a little notebook going, and I'd been writing a lot. And I had written a tune called July Talk, which was like, oh, that's an interesting song. It was like 4 verses, didn't have a chorus. It had like this weird breakdown in the middle. And I was like, this is an interesting song, and it feels as if it's a conversation. It feels like it's two people singing. This feels obviously like you could definitely go back and forth and like kind of like scream back and forth. And in my mind, it felt a bit like, I'm going to Jackson, Johnny Cash and June or something. Like, it had this feeling. And so I meet Leah. She had this band called Mothers of Brides. So I'm going on a real. So everybody had bands in Toronto. We were all playing in different projects, whatever. And I meet Leah, and she's got this band where it's like sort of a performance art duo. I remember they were always drumming with knives. They had knives on stage.
Yeah, that's very performance art.
And like playing guitar. It was like influenced by like Miranda July and like, I don't know, Cans and Furs maybe. And I was watching them and just being like, she's like just so compelling, like an unbelievably compelling person. And so sort of convinced her to start playing songs together every week in this jam space that we had been playing, Mohawk Lodge and Eamon tunes in. And as soon as the other band fell apart, kind of was able to convince Danny and Eamon to come into the fold and make music with Leah. And then I went to Josh and I said, remember this idea that we had over here? Like, let's just try to like put everything into one box and see what develops. And like, as you might imagine, with all of that energy and different sources of like energy and ideas, I think it all happened like really quickly. And we started just creating a lot of art really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And by instinct. And all of a sudden it was like, we're shooting music videos in 2 or 3 hours because everyone's just really knows.
They're just in it.
They get it. We got it. We understood. We were very exciting time.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I came from Edmonton to Toronto to July Talk.
Well, I'm glad you brought up a bunch about Eamon, because I was going to ask about Eamon, because he was such a significant figure around here, right? And I think for a lot of bands here, I mean, he had such a presence, and his like live presence especially. And he was just known to be like, he was by himself going off to Europe and playing shows and stuff. And everyone's like, how's this guy doing this? Like, how's this guy have a career going? But it was really inspiring, and he's of course a really good guy. And so I found it really interesting to see how close that connection was. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure people have pointed out, like, you two have this very unique, like, growly voice that sounds like you've really done some damage to it, so those two guys to be together, I found such an interesting kind of union. But I'm wondering what, you sort of alluded to a little bit, right? But I was kind of curious as to what, Eamon rubbed off on you.
For sure. Oh man, like that's such a blurry line that I have no idea really. Like it's hard for me to have perspective on it. But I don't know. He,
Like you were with him in
I
the
think,
hard years,
approached,
right?
yeah, of
Those were
course.
like
I
he
mean,
was
we were,
pretty
of
hard, going hard on the
course, yeah, of
substances, on the
course.
touring, and
Yeah.
every part of it.
To go back even further than that, like that guy was like, I don't even know if he's really like, improved in like, for instance, his guitar playing since he was like a teenager. He like almost like arrived fully formed when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
He could play the way he plays now then, you know, and he was writing songs. There was like a real shift. I think he had had punk bands from when we were like 13. He had the Morellos, which was like just so inspiring when I was like a kid. You know, like my stepdad had bought me like, you know, the Clash and the Ramones and the Sex Pistols or whatever to like inform me on what punk rock was. But like Eamon comes from like a family, his dad's from Wexford in Ireland, and is like just one of the most pure music fans I've ever known. And so that house is like just this, some would call it dissonant in some ways, because there's just records going on in this room. His brother's playing drums over here in this room. Bowie's going on over here. You know, the amps are playing, like it's just all over the place, and it's like a lot. But as a young person, I think I was really fortunate to have met him. Like it was a real happenstance thing where a few weeks before we met when we were 11, he moved a block away from where my dad lived in near Westmount Mall in North Lenora. And him, myself, and this guy John Baleshko became like the Three Musketeers. Like we were just best friends. Couldn't exist without each other throughout our teenage years. Took the bus every day together, whatever. And yeah, I think we kind of occupied our own spaces. Like I was the film guy, he was the music guy. But we always ended up, you know, howling away on the piano. And, you know, I was really taken by his songs. And I think I was a real champion of his songs. I was usually one of the first people to be able to hear what he had been working on. And he was usually the first person to see anything I was making film-wise.
Yeah.
And so I think even in my approach to film, I think there was like a bit of a suffer for your art, tortured. You know, I was really interested in people like Elliott Smith and Daniel Johnston and Tom Waits, and people that really approach their art from a pretty manic place. And I think he was often coming from a similar perspective. And I think that John was also coming from a similar kind of suffer for your art thing. And I think that took us down some pretty wild roads where mental health wise, like I fell off the cliff a few times and he fell off the cliff a few times, and that's life. But yeah, I don't know. I think that we rubbed off on each other. I'm very grateful for that friendship. And yet it was a really complicated friendship, and you have a lot of ups and downs and whatever. So
especially when you go through all those kinds of things.
100%.
Those are pretty hyper-focused at certain...
I mean, some of it made it into Eamon's books. You know, those tours were so chaotic, like unbelievably chaotic. Like I don't think I would be able to experience some of that now.
Yeah.
You know, just the chaos and sometimes it felt like we were driven towards self-destruction. And now I think we have a greater understanding of things like privilege and things like just how lucky we are to be alive. And coming from Edmonton and feeling like you're from a small town, I think it puts a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and you want to...
Big time it does.
You know what I mean? So it was a lot.
You talking about what that time was. So I heard you say something and I had to stop it and pause it and write it down, which was not valuing your own life or existence is actually encouraged or rewarded in the music scene. And I was wanting to ask you to elaborate, which you sort of started to there.
Yeah.
But if you could just just continue that, like what is the experience that informs that thought? Because I think which sounds surprising to a lot of...
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, I also want to be careful because I don't want to tokenize my experience in Alberta, because I think this city in particular contains multitudes of different experiences, and I don't want to pigeonhole it at all. But I would say that the scene that I was involved in was pretty self-destructive, and I think there was a sense that putting yourself through pain was a noble deed. Now, there was all kinds of scenes coming out of Edmonton, and I think this city punches well above its weight in terms of the incredible artists and art that it's produced. But like my experience within it was just like was, I just lost some friends, like John that I mentioned earlier, passed away a few years ago. And I think in my formative years, when I like found myself in a self-destructive, self-abusive place, there was something inside me telling me that that was productive and where I wanted to be if I was going to become anything. And maybe there's truth in that. I don't really know, but all I know is that I think Eamon and I both shared a drive and a blind ambition that we wanted to share our ideas and our lives and our feelings with the world. And I think sometimes when you have what feels like a quality, what feels like an ability to set your mind to something and do it, if the thing you're setting your mind to is self-destruction or is self-abuse, you're going to do that too. You're going to see that through right till its end. You know what I mean? Maybe that's a scattering of thoughts, but I would say that having gone through that and found my way to some friendships that feel at home in a more grounded space, that feel, I don't know how best to say it, man. It's like, I don't know, just to like bring it to like the song Arrivals, the second song on my new record. It's like, it's really just about like waiting for my baby to come in those like final moments. My baby came 2.5 weeks late, and there was just this like strange 2.5 weeks where we were just like on pause. And in some ways it felt as if the due date had been like this deadline for me to like find solid ground to offer to this new like being. Like you can stand here and you're going to be safe when like up
like you had a fixed timeline now. Fix all the things.
I don't know if you felt that. Do you have kids? I don't know.
Yeah, I got 2 kids.
Did you feel that way? Oh, you want to be able to kind of like fix yourself before they show up.
I felt consumed by idealism.
Yeah.
In those moments.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, like my brother's going through a lot with his health, his ability to, stop doing things that are hurting him. I'm in a space where I'm like trying to face demons that have been plaguing me, and you're never going to be a finished product, right?
Yeah.
But I think the recognition that I had been surrounded by people, and I was one of them, that just didn't really value being on part of this life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And sort of glorified that in some capacity. I think I just wanted to find a new thing. And you know what actually was the moment where it shifted for me? Was I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2020, with type 1 diabetes. And there was this moment where I had done this like program where we were delivering groceries in COVID, and we were using our van, and I was picking up all these heavy groceries, and I threw out my back in the back of the car. That was my assumption. But then I started doing all these blood tests, and my blood's completely off the charts, high glucose. And there's a point in my back that is like wicked painful and screwed up. And it's right where my pancreas is. And I recognize, oh my God, like, I started doing the WebMD searching.
Yeah.
And I recognized that's where my pancreas is. And I start looking at like high glucose levels and pain on your back around your pancreas are signs of pancreatic cancer. And I have this moment where I'm like, I think I'm going to die. And I called Eamon, and I talked to Eamon, and Eamon talked me down. But it was like the first time I can remember that I like recognized that I didn't want to die. I was like very sure in that moment that I was like, I want to stick around. And before that, I have concrete memories of like driving by the river here and being like, oh, once I get this film out, or once I like finish this song idea and just get like a recording of it, I think that that'll be enough. And I think I can die. And that's like pretty fucked up, but I think everybody goes through it. And I think it's relatable.
And I think it's fair to say, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That's not like a cliche suicidal thought. It's a carelessness of life thought.
So no, it's a blurry line.
Like suicidal in the sense that like, it's not like I'm going to go make a plan.
No.
You're just sort of saying like, there's really nothing else for me.
Totally.
Right.
And I think, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a difficult go sometimes for all of us. But I think having this wake up call where it was very much like being faced with it. And even though, you know, it was a type 1 diagnosis and not the pancreatic cancer diagnosis that followed it, it was still like I was dying in that moment. You know, like I had lost 50 pounds and I was a rake, and had I not changed my lifestyle very significantly, that would have been the end for me. And being faced with that was a real like page turner moment for me. And then following that with now welcoming a baby, it was just sort of like, deep down, I always wanted to live. You know what I mean? I always felt love and felt hope and felt joy. I just didn't think that they were productive. I didn't think that positivity contained the same value as loneliness and as self-destruction, because somewhere along the line, I'd signed a contract that wasn't how it worked. And now, more than ever, I think that like the most punk rock thing in the world is joy. And I think the coolest thing in the world you can do is like help your kid get ready for the day and like genuinely just be a dependable person for your kid. That's all you owe them. I don't know about you, but that's literally all I care about is to just have them be able to look up at me and say, I'm safe. I can depend on this.
That's everything.
That's
like
all it is.
Their worldview. And you talk to everybody now. I'm being so convinced this lately. I hear everybody talk about their problems and the things that they try to dig out, and we're such a therapized society. Of course. Now. And I'm like, but I remember hearing that your worldview is formed in your first 4 years, which really comes down to, am I safe in this world or not?
Yeah.
And then from
Can
there,
I trust it?
Every version of validation and security and everything you get from that, like, is informed by this thing that happens in a time that you have no controls.
100%. And I think that's also, I grew up in Riverdale in like this really special moment in that part of town where there was like a bunch of, you know, working class hippie families working together to really create a hell of a community. And I think I always deep down was deeply an optimist. I think I was always extremely optimistic as a person and an idealist, you know. And I think,
do you think that saved you?
In some ways, I think it did.
Because I'm discovering the same thing.
Yeah.
That I'm discovering more dark places, right? But I'm always this go to bed at night and somehow I think like tomorrow I'm gonna be better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do better tomorrow.
And trusting that everybody around you wants to choose love, you know, and wants to be the best versions of themselves and all of those things, you know. Like I think sometimes my optimism, which I get from my mother, like is a secret weapon, and I'm so grateful for it. But I think that I'm very grateful for it. I think that I ended up taking often a role of like sort of a support person for friends that were going through pain. And that often shielded me from going through the pain myself. I was often kind of an observer. And in some of my like less proud moments, looking in hindsight, I think that I was overly trying to be a savior to friends and create.
Did you feel like a magnet for them?
Maybe. I just don't think that it's particularly helpful to try to be like, this is how you do it. Like people have to do their own thing. And I have regrets about how, especially with friends that I've lost.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just trying to model something or something. But I always feel, you know, and staying with my parents right now and like just being in that house and remembering that house was always, I think, a safe place to be. You know, it was always well-intentioned, but I think I've learned a lot about how being a friend is more just about listening and existing rather than like trying to fix everything. But the reason I say that is just because I think that idealism and that optimism, sort of dogged optimism in times of darkness.
Yeah.
It's, I'm very grateful to have been given that maybe in my first 4 years on the planet, you know.
Well, I think, you know, the world, like by the world, like whether it be media or whatever version, like that dogged optimism, it gets painted a little glossy, which can be very repelling to people who are more in touch with their darkness.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why we sort of like do not steer that way for a long time until all of a sudden you realize joy is a good thing. Right. I think even going back, like you had said, I want to avoid some tokenism stuff. I think there's no hint of tokenism in what you said. I think that there's such a legacy of the tortured poet in
Yeah.
in the music industry. And I mean, there's all kinds of, biopic, like documentaries even,
Of course.
right, about some of the most famous ones, and the question being asked, like, did our love of the person actually drive them? Because they started leaning in to those things that weren't good for them, but somehow were good for the curated performative sort of stature, right?
Yeah, it's like if you grow up on thinking that insanity and chaos breeds good art,
Yeah.
and you sign off on that, and you think that's the only way to make good art,
Yeah.
then I think if you're invested in making that art, you're sealing your own fate in a direction. But I still think that I don't know. I mean, I guess.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You already hinted at this. Like, you obviously said you sort of explored all of those things because you were making this Peter Dreams record,
Yeah.
like right in that deadline of this due date that's hanging over you, right? That's sort of, as I've heard and read, like those things were all like mulled together. So you're like mining all this stuff out of yourself, and it is an incredibly vulnerable record, right, to put out. But now you've had the child.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, did it palpably change right away? Like your ability to sort of like lean into the darkness and lean on that for the songwriting and come up with some great material and come out with that around the subject of what you were wrestling with for this child as the father, as your own example. I'm wondering how quickly that maybe started to shift for you and what that felt like.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the truth is so often found in the mundane or the moderation of the in-between, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have these very vast, heady statements that can be made. And then once you start living it, you actually recognize that the extremes aren't always the source of the truth. It's actually somewhere in between. So I guess by actually becoming a parent and having all of the sleepless nights and hustling to make work happen in between and witnessing what it's like between the connection of a mother and a child and seeing that, like, for instance, it's like that Bry Webb line from the Constantines. He has a solo record called Provider, and he has a lyric. I don't want to screw it up, but it's something like zebra standing on the moon, looking down upon the earth, helpless in the operating room as the wife is giving birth. And I think, with the utmost respect and love to all mothers that might be listening to this, God, you support the earth and all of us. But I think the male experience of witnessing that support and that love often feels very confusing because you're there and you're trying to support your kid and you want to be there for them and be a part of their life and carry half the weight and do, and ultimately there's things you can't do, and that bond is so real. So I think since having a kid, I've had, it's been humbling, and I just adore the time I get to spend, and I wish I could do more. I mean, Spencer Krug, I did a song with him called Certain Father. We did a song called Certain Father on Last July Talk record. And he had just had a kid. I think his kid was like 2 or something. And he spoke quite a bit about how hard it was to witness just the burden that lands on the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that you can't provide all that support. So I don't know. I guess that's where my head's been at with it a little bit lately is learning from a position of that humility and learning to be kind to myself and just enjoy the time that I get to spend as a father. And I think the sort of matter of life and death that some of those songs pre-fatherhood took on, I guess now here's life, here's death. I'm finding myself to the in-between, where I'm really kind of just reckoning with the day-to-day again of trying to create a stable atmosphere and like a dependability, and And it's more just like, okay, let's get down to business. You know what I mean? Like, let's like really take it
Life
on
is
each
so much
day.
both and, right? It's like,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
gotta always be both and.
Yeah. Life is right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Death is right there. Yeah. Go on.
So I guess one of my big questions, my curiosities, I should say, about the record, because I think artistically it's super relatable to people,
of course.
of all sort of different creative mediums. But like you had been doing July Talk for well over a decade. You had, grown into this cycle pattern, often of developing and living the persona. Because like, even like right now, like you sit down in a chair and I get to know a million things about you. It's not vice versa, right? And at some point in your career that flips, right? You're trying for everybody to know who you are. And then all of a sudden it's like everybody knows everything and I know nothing. And so you've developed a persona, you've been writing songs, you've been putting them out, but in that sort of group version of what comes out. But then you make this solo record. It's clearly got such vulnerable material, like you were just talking about yourself and being so honest. There's a song about your sister, also related to children and childbirth, and like super painful to get out. I'm wondering if, despite all of your experience and thick skinning of all those years with the band, was it still hard to put something out that vulnerable? Because the process of making something and then giving it to the world for them to interpret are
two different things.
Yeah.
It was funny. I had a conversation with my mom after I got off stage in Toronto in February when we did the big Toronto kind of release show. And I think when I found out I was going to become a parent, I knew that I had to contribute in a way that I was going to have to just go find another project in order to like provide for the family. And so it was like, okay, it makes sense. I'll do my own record. And I didn't feel, I didn't think much about releasing it, as you say. And I sat down and I got the songs together. Some of them were older songs, some of them were brand new. And I think because my contract with authenticity is such that I feel I have to kind of put my own skin in the game to make something vital or worthwhile, right? So if I sit down and write a song, I feel I need to like put something in it that's like a morsel of deep truth that shares something so that it matters. And maybe that's not a fair contract, but it's one that I've signed with myself at this point.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think much about releasing it, but I was putting all of these things forward. So throughout the process, I was just staying true to what I felt was honest and what was authentic and what was correct and how to approach this thing. And then when it came time to share it, I was just trying to be as honest as possible in sharing it, like in this conversation with you I'm having right now. And I'm never thinking tons about the consequences of that sharing. And maybe I should, but I think that it's like all part of, I think, the fortune of living the life that I've loved living so much and being able to travel and share ideas. And I'm joining, hundreds of generations before me of people that traveled around and shared their ideas and their songs and tried to reflect what they felt coming from the world back at the world. And that's just like, that's as old as time in every culture, and I think
definitely fits that Rick Rubin philosophy of the audience be last.
Interesting. Yeah,
right?
It's true. And it's not as if I wasn't, I'm always conscious of the audience when I'm making art. I'm definitely not somebody who's making it for myself to listen to because I don't really listen to it. Now it's the world's, know? But I do think that in this condition in particular, I guess I was standing there on the balcony with my mom after I played the show, and I learned a lot from my mom about how to frame ideas. She was a journalist at the Edmonton Journal for 30 years or whatever, and great writer. And I saw it, and I was like, never thought about how I just was trying to be as honest as possible, but I never thought about how vulnerable this would feel, and she was very encouraging, but it's something that, I think it's my job to just sort of shamelessly put it out there. And if I don't think like, I don't know if anybody throws any negativity back at me for doing so. Like, I can't imagine being affected by it at this point because like bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I got
Well, I mean,
life to
speaking of
live.
tokenism,
whatever.
I mean, there's like gendered conversation tokenism, but I do still really believe how important right now it is that the vulnerability of men is available in the world. So I think that it's really fantastic. And that's why it's stuck out to me, right? That this is knowing personally that it's two different things.
Yeah.
And having gone through that myself, but not anywhere on a scale, right? So I was just curious what your experience.
I don't know. It's hard to know. I'm not somebody, and I hope that you can understand. It's like, I'm not somebody that thinks a lot about that. You know, Eamon and I always used to have a term that was like, you know, I'm trying not to be in the business of overthinking things, you know, or Neil Young has the, like, you think you stink kind of rule, you know? And I don't know, in this age of like social media, like framing yourself and all this stuff, like I kind of avoid that shit at all costs. And by that, I mean, overthinking who I am to the world and all that. I just try, I think it's like this, like I said, I think it's like a deep contract I have with myself where I'm just like, if something doesn't need to exist, don't make it exist. Like if you're writing a song and you're sitting down and it's like feels kind of boring and it doesn't contribute anything to the world, and like, just don't.
It definitely feels like the artist contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like,
right?
I create because I need to pull something out of nothing and make it something.
I think
that's
so.
what art is. So
yeah,
that totally makes sense.
Yeah, like I definitely hear it sometimes, not to shit on other artists at all, but like when somebody's forcing something out, when they have to, when the record label's pushing them to come up with that sophomore record, or and they just don't really, you know, the songs are about touring or, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like, you feel for those folks, you know? No, I'm very lucky. And it's something I said, you know, before, but I'll say again, it's just like the reason that I'm able to do any of that is just because I'm like very fortunate with friends and loved ones and family around me that like encourages me and makes me feel safe enough to do it, you know?
Yeah, what a blessing.
What a blessing. And that like all stems just from like, I'm so grateful. You know, when I moved to Toronto, I was really brought in by this group of artists, first and foremost from Peterborough, of all places, that they had all gone to this art school in Peterborough that's quite similar to Vic here. It was called PCDS. It closed now. But like incredible artists went there. Like Serena Ryder went there, you know, a bunch of filmmakers that I've worked with, Jared Rabb. There's so many great artists that came out of that school. And when I moved, I just kind of like fell into that scene with Josh and Jared and all these people and Robin Love, you know, and I've just been really lucky with those friend groups. And like, and I think if anybody listening is, you know, interested in this kind of thing, it's like, I think we all have the ability to just like make our friends feel safe to do things that are scary. You know what I mean? Like look at each other in the eyes and be like, you can do this, go do this. I can tell you want to do this, go do it. You know, and that's why scary things get made. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And I see the same thing with the sinner shit. Like the reason Ryan Coogler is really able to do what he does when I've witnessed him firsthand in the moment is because his wife, Zinzi, is the producer on all the movies, supports him unabashedly so hard since forever. His best bud, Michael B. Jordan's in all the movies. Ludwig Göransson, his other buddy, does all the score. Like that guy that is a supported person. His whole family wants him to succeed. It's a superpower.
In the business.
It's a superpower. And I'm not comparing myself to him at all, but I'm just saying that friends and family, the way in which someone is surrounded and held up, you know, I think that's where we can find, you know, what we need to find.
We're really close up against your hard stop. So I'm glad you mentioned Sinners. So I just wanted to throw in, at least throw in, being involved with that must have been absolutely incredible. Like to go from 0 to 100 like that. I mean, anybody who looks up your role in that as Bert, it was like incredible, supporting role. Your way in, the story of your way in through that song, which by the way, I was a big Walking Dead fan. And I just went right through that, assuming that was Tom Waits. I never even looked it up.
Right.
It was like, I just thought this must be some weird Tom Waits version of a CCR song. that was your way into that movie. I have a couple questions. I would hopefully, of course, be quick answers. But one is, well, I heard you say with Tom Power that the very first thought you had was, I need to work out.
Yeah.
I guess my second thought is like, you're presented with that character and what it is. And this is going to be your first role but a huge role. And you're going to play, a Jim Crow era, like Southern 30s white supremacist hillbilly-ish guy.
Yeah.
Who's like really good at music and a vampire, which is cool parts of it. But I mean, did you have any fear? I'm wondering, is there any fear attached to like, this is what now people will think of me? Like, am I making them?
Well, you're also going and doing it in the South. We were filming in New Orleans with a largely local crew to New Orleans, who has a lot of the films that get made in the South are about slavery or are period pieces surrounding slavery and the history of the oppression of Black people in the South. And so they've had to watch these stories get replayed and replayed.
Wow.
And some of which have been told in a really beautiful way, like prioritizing the Black experience, and some have been told in a sort of trauma porn way that, seems regrettable, I think, as it ages. I think within this scenario, it didn't cross my mind to shield myself from that experience when it was such a prominent, brilliant Black director asking me to do it. Because to me, the only thing that would have done would be to distance myself from the inconvenience of feeling the weight of that history, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it was like, well, if this guy says jump, I'm going to say how high. Like, I just want to portray his vision and help him do that by any means necessary. Now, I still had to say the N-word on screen, and I've had people that I love and respect express their discomfort with me doing that.
And disappointment, which hurts.
It hurts, but it's like, I think, I tried my best to approach that particular specific experience as best I could. Ryan and I discussed it. Wasn't said in rehearsals at all. It was said at a bare minimum of what needed to be done for the film. Wanting to pronounce these pronunciations and the dialect and all these things. I guess like I said, I think it was just really important to me. Here is somebody that's asking for my help. That's the bottom line. And this isn't a character that is being glorified or simplified to just being evil either. Yeah. This is a character that is trying to be like all of Coogler's films. The villains aren't entirely villainous and the heroes aren't entirely heroic. So yeah, it was very complicated, but I would say what I recognize is like, okay, well, let's say I got high and mighty and said, no, I don't want to play that character. Well, then somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that helps anyone. I think for me, it was just like, this is the story that I really trust the people that are making it. And so I just wanted to contribute in whatever way I could. But it was entirely not complicated. Sorry, it was entirely complicated. I was going through, it was spinning through my mind. And I definitely wanted to do it justice and portray the history in whatever accurate way we could.
Well, it was amazing. It was pretty incredible. I thought you nailed whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously
it was a small part of an absolute juggernaut project, and just to be able to witness that history of a film that I think will really be sticking around in
I think so.
Real conversation.
I think
very
so.
Grateful for it.
Well, Peter, this has been amazing. You've been so generous with your time and your personal story and everything. I know we whipped through a whole bunch of stuff really fast, but I know I'm deeply appreciative of the whole thing. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys play. Can't believe you're playing a Ritchie Hall show here. That's going to be so amazing. 2025 seems like quite a year with the Sinners movie and your Peter Dreams project. And I'm sure there's still July talk in
100%
in the work. So I just want to wish you all the best and say thanks.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay.
Great chat.
Thanks, man. Okay.
Hey, I'm Alexi. Stick around for Post Fame with me and my dad.
You all good?
Oh, yeah.
And you showed me your notes. So I'll take that as all good. All good.
Like basically.
All ready to go. Yeah.
Of course.
Of course. Okay, well, let's talk about episode 20, Peter Dreams,
Yes.
which I've talked to a lot of people about in advance because it was one of my favorite conversations. Just, I think, just in context, not like, it's a competition or anything like that. It's just, it was the first
Yeah.
in person that I've got to do, and
Yeah.
um, full disclosure, made a couple of mistakes to learn from as far as like setting up my audio equipment, recording, and um, maybe lost a couple bits from the conversation, but
Yeah.
we're okay. We came out okay, but
It
you
was
know,
good.
but having a conversation with somebody in person, in real
Mhm.
life, and getting just that, I don't know what the right word is because I don't ever want to be the person who uses the word vibe, but getting that thing from somebody like
Yeah.
in real life is so different. And he has did I describe it to you? Like if you see his pictures and his like photo shoot photos, and he's got like these very pronounced eyes, right? Um, but they are like piercing in real life. Like like look right through you
Like,
because at the same time he's a person who doesn't just sort of show up, and like I'm a stranger to him at that point.
yeah.
And he was clearly not a person who just shows up to do the job, right?
Hmm.
But he shows up to be a person with you.
Yeah.
Um and I think that immediate depth sort of fueled and this guy is looking right through me right now. And
Yeah.
and I loved it. Like I absolutely loved having that kind of a conversation where he was clearly willing to just tell anything like it was and talk.
Hey,
And yeah.
I was gonna say, like, all my notes, like, none of my notes are like as specific as sometimes they are. Like, sometimes I'll have like pulled quotes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And like I have one, but all my notes kind of allude to, I guess, like the depth of your guys' talk. And there's like a couple of places where I wrote like a note about like depth of talk, and then I put like IRL question mark, and then like a couple other things, and I was just like face to face. And I think I was gonna ask like two things. First, like, do you think that you got kind of like a different experience out of it because it was face to face? Like, um, I mean, with people like, hopping on like the Zoom call with someone like there's already that level of comfortability. But like for the Zoom calls you've taken with people you haven't known prior versus like meeting with someone face to face prior, like, do you think it made that significant like of a difference? Because I feel like it did.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And from your perspective, I 100% feel like it did. Like I've had these calls with people that I've known a long time. And because there's that not just familiarity, but actual like love for each other, that kind
Yeah.
of that kind of does the work of trying to reach through the screen to a
Yeah.
degree. And those have been really nice. I think that he has this personality that could probably better than most with a stranger reach through the screen.
I
But
was gonna say, I'm
it,
like, is it IRL or is it like him or is it both?
it's first and foremost him,
Yeah.
100%. Like I walked away with so much admiration for this guy. And and it comes from a few things. It comes from having spent a lot of time around musicians in this business, right? And I could just tell you, and that's where it's partially me. I could tell you this is the kind of guy that I would have grown up around the scene in and gravitated towards. Like he's the kind of guy I wanted to be like
Yeah.
and with more importantly than like with in the music scene, right? Like that's the kind of anyhow. So yeah, it's a little bit of me too to say that IRL was like significantly better,
Better.
but I think
Yeah.
it's fed by him. And to be completely honest, I think I'm better in those situations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so the whole thing just felt so natural and so enjoyable as a result, right? Um, yeah, but yeah, it was like pretty, like his ability, like you said, like in there, like we went pretty deep on some things, right? So, like I feel like it all started with, I referenced a guy from the Edmonton scene, Eamon McGrath, who ended up becoming a big part of the whole conversation. Because the whole like it kind of felt like Stand By Me-ish. Do you know what I mean? Like here's the guys that I ran with when I was a kid, right? Type thing.
Yeah.
And that whole like coming of age together story was like impossibly woven in to every other part of his story. And Eamon was a huge part. And so like for those who don't know, because it got mentioned so much, like Eamon's an Edmonton based kind of singer songwriter. It kind of has
Yeah.
been like the modern version of Troubadour for a long time. And there's a couple of great ones out of Edmonton, but a guy named Scott Cook is another one in the folk industry. But you know, Eamon's like traveled the world and he just keeps finding gigs and making records and writing songs and just, you know what I mean? It's not this
Yeah.
typical, because you hear me talk a lot about the podcast with artists about trajectories of careers.
Mm-hmm.
And, but
It's not
there's,
the typical.
yeah, and there's artists who jump off the trajectory, right? And just keep doing it, right? That's all that matters to them. I think Eamon's one of those guys, and I knew that they were close. I didn't know it was the whole, we grew up down in Riverdale and it
Yeah.
was like a little community kind of close. Like, so all of that was really cool, but it really led into his being vulnerable about one of the biggest lessons he's learned about how he was being self-destructive and how closely that's tied to an ethic, if I want to call it that, in the music scene sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
um, so there was a lot of vulnerability that stemmed out of that, but that's who Eamon was. And for us, like me and the Angus brothers,
Yeah.
we loved Eamon's music and looked up to him a lot and would make a point, maybe if we were in Toronto and Eamon was in Toronto, to go see his gig, or do you know what I mean? So
Awesome. Yeah.
a lot of point of reference for me and probably people who have been around Edmonton at least for a while. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, my other point was like, because you mentioned vulnerability, is like, uh, his when he's talking about like talking with his mom after playing a show and like learning that like, he was like, oh, I learned a lot from this moment, like talking with his mom, and he was like, oh, just like how to frame my ideas properly, and how like vulnerable that feels, and then the different layer of like putting it out there, which I've known we've talked about. Um, but
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was like thinking on that. But then his other quote that he built later on from that was, he was like, it's my job to shamelessly put it out there. And then he was kind of talking about, he's like, oh, if I get like any negativity from it, like I'm not affected by it. And I'd also just like love that because I think so many artists just talk about like, oh yeah, like, it's like hard to put your stuff out there. And then they just kind of leave it at that, you know? Like you hear that like a lot. Like it's
Because
just like, oh, like,
it's a loop to
oh yeah.
most, right? And if you live in that loop, in other words, I'm doing this, but I need the validation back after,
Yeah.
then on scale, that can turn on you really fast. And so, yeah, I loved
Yeah.
that point too, which is he's saying he's figured out how to cut the loop off where it's like, what I do is I make it and I put it out there. After that, it's not mine anymore. So I don't have to
Yeah.
be concerned about what comes back. That's
And I love
very
how like
mature.
it was mature. I love how genuine it was too, because like he could have accidentally phrased that in a way that could have like came off cocky. Like, oh, negativity, like I don't care. Like I'm not affected by it. Like I don't care what people think. And like it was just like you could tell it was like zero that, which I also love. It was just like it was coming from a place of like vulnerability instead of like overconfidence,
Yeah,
which
I agree.
I'm a fan of.
Yeah. He had so many bits like that where in the moment I could tell um like like there were a number of edits that I made to close up really long gaps.
Yeah.
And part of me wishes I didn't, but part of me just knows it's a podcast. And
Mhm.
if you were there in the room in the moment, right, you would feel the weight of those gaps while he's thinking about his response.
About his responses, yeah.
And because the responses for him had to be true, right? So he would go in and find the truth to bring it out. And that, again, the in real life part, I guess I'm hearkening back to that, which, like, you get caught up in that pace of a conversation when somebody is being very reflective and truthful, but not like in a heavy way. It was still like, this is how he does things. And I guess that's what really impressed me too, is that he's just willing to access that information with a complete stranger like that.
Yeah.
And not because he just, like, not for, you know, there's lots of reasons that could happen, but because he's willing to try to bridge a gap of a conversation with me, knowing that it's just for an hour. But anyhow, clearly it left an impact on me. And the intro part to this episode, where I'm going on about where I actually got the real truth. So what really impacted me, I loved the interview, right? Impacted me. But what really hit me was 2 days later when I went to that private hall show that he invited me to.
Right.
And I saw him and how he was
live.
with no, not live, on the floor talking to people who were all there for him. And his friends looked the same as family to me. It's like, it would be like all of the Riverdale neighborhood came out to support, like, a kid who grew up and did really well. And it felt like that. And you learn more about the truth about somebody, is what I say in the intro, like, about seeing that, than just what I thought was a great conversation that had vulnerability. But man, did it ever back it up. I guess put those two together. That's how I really got impacted. There is so many things I even want to talk to him about that I didn't get to. I probably would have talked to him more about the Sinners movie that he was in, which is such a good movie. And he didn't play like it wasn't like a huge role, but it wasn't like, that part where it's like, everybody watch, you're going to see me for 30 seconds type, that, you know what I mean? It wasn't a bit role. Like, it was significant. And I think that whole experience would be really cool. And he got that gig off of this cover of a CCR song called Bad Moon Rising, which is so cool and so kind of dark and haunting, like you would expect him to produce, that he had made 10 years ago. And I had first heard on The Walking Dead, and we sort of briefly touched on it in the conversation. But I sort of wanted to ask him his thoughts on being the recipient of how music can actually have such a long lifespan, that 10 years later it would pay dividends. It makes me think of the Kate Bush song in the Stranger Things, right? How that song, like, gets resurfaced. Yeah, how, in some instances, and maybe I wish it would happen more, the incredible lifespan that music can have to come back around and benefit a new audience, as well as the person who made it or is making it. So I didn't get to talk to him about that. I would have liked to. I think there was a part of me that, because his creativity is so tapped into, clearly, for the amount of things he does over the years, sometimes I want to ask people what their kind of creative philosophy is. Because if you're doing different, like, if you're acting and you're making music, and then you find out he was actually pursuing a life in film and media, all of those creative outlets, a person probably has a singular philosophy that carries into all of them. And I was curious about that. Just didn't get to it. He plays in an all musician hockey league out in Toronto. Do you remember I went back that one year for the tournament? Photo? No, I didn't find the photo. But anyhow, he plays in one of the teams out there. And of course, I'm always curious to talk to somebody about that, because I do the same thing and I love it. But like, I could have talked to him about a lot of stuff, but very cool.
I like that.
Yeah, very cool. Um,
Very cool.
so, and he told me he'll circle back on it someday. So I'm going to try to hold him to it like in a year or
Yeah.
something if he has new stuff coming out. I will say for people listening, like he was there on his solo album, which he made and recorded with the guys in a band called Moon River, um, who are very, very good and were his backing band, but have their own music out, which is very, very good. And I would love for people just to listen to and pay attention to. I think it deserves a lot of credit for the impact they had in the record he got to make. So, yeah.
Is that our music shout out for the day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I like
Um,
that.
it's fall. Do you have any new discoveries? Do you have a new playlist that you've had to
Oh,
make? Is there anything
I have a new
exciting?
playlist. Of course, I have a new playlist. Back to school and it's fall and leaves are falling. Of course, I have a new playlist. It's
Okay,
called
hold on. You're 20 now.
I'm 20 now.
You're gonna
I
have
was
to
20.
start. Well, I know, but I'm just saying in general.
Oh, right.
I don't know. Um, you're gonna have to start finding your fall songs. Like, so for me, uh, every year I have to play and then share it to Instagram or something. A song by Buffalo Tom, which was a favorite band of mine from the late '90s, called Summer, which is like Summer's Gone, is essentially the chorus, like Summer's Gone. So I play it all the time in the fall
I
when
like that.
summer's gone. And then the leaves are already changing here in Edmonton and falling, which sucks,
Yeah.
very early, which means I'm probably going to start to play Yola Tengo's Autumn Sweater a little bit
Oh, that
early
one's so good. That's one of
this
mine.
year. Yeah, okay. That's probably everybody's. It's so fantastic.
It's so
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, so I'm just letting you know that that's going to be a
Okay.
very important part of
Thank
your
you.
indie cred
Yeah.
going forward. Okay, sorry, you're the name of your playlist.
Okay. It's very suited for this fall because Edmonton weather, for whatever reason, decided to be super hot right at the start of fall. As we know, I've been wearing all my cute summer tanks I haven't been able to wear all summer. Um, anyways, so it's called Hot and Almost Fall. Um, because it's hot out and
You don't have to
because
explain the title. But it's good.
yes I do because all my titles are very specific for a reason and I got made fun of at work once for this, okay? Um, anyways,
Are there
but
double
we
meanings to
started.
hot?
Yes, actually there are because my outfits are
Okay.
hottest in the fall.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Wow. Okay. I
yeah.
get it. Okay.
Anyways, um, yeah, it's just all my fall music for this season. A lot of Olivia Dean on there. Um,
Very
I
nice.
hope you know who that is.
I do.
Okay, good. And then it actually started the first song I added that I was like, this is gonna start me off on the right note.
I was going to
I don't know
ask.
how to pronounce the name. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce the name. It's either Ota or Ota. It's OTA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's say Ota. But it's Ota Brown, and the song "Daydream" by Ota Brown. And I'll add it right now as we speak to our playlist because it
Okay.
deserves a
Perfect.
spot.
Okay.
Um, but I listened to it and between like the cover art and the song, I was like, yeah, this is the right start to my fall playlist. And then it grew, and I just think it's very like nice. I don't know. Like there's a playlist that Spotify makes called Sexy Indie, and I
Yeah, I
always
have that
think
one.
the songs, yeah, but I always think for like a lot of people's like Spotify mixes, it doesn't do the name justice. Like it's just indie music that sometimes is just like a little bit like rhythmic more than not. And
You're
I'm
saying
like, it's not sexy.
it's not really sexy. Okay.
It's not
But
really sexy. So this is like
okay,
this playlist
I
though,
gotta.
like this is what I think is like sexy indie playlist.
Do you have Ruby Waters on that playlist?
Yeah,
Because you
I
can't
do.
find a song of Ruby Waters that isn't classified as sexy. Um,
That's real.
but here's funny is that it's not sexy enough for you, but I kind of got in trouble for playing sexy indie at work.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. There was a moment when somebody was like, "What is this?" Anyhow,
Okay,
don't know.
actually, though, on that note, one of my managers at Pip, whenever he comes in, because he works like a lot of nights, he'll come in and he'll say hi to people, hop on the iPad, and just start playing sexy indie. And I told him the other day that we were doing like impressions of him when he wasn't there once, and all I did was just like pretend to walk in, wave at people, go on the iPad, and hit play on sexy indie, and everyone was like, "Oh, that sounds accurate." So it's a certified Pip playlist as well, if anyone's listening who goes there, because
Nice.
that's where it's from.
That's nice. Well, I'm glad we just organically landed on sharing our fall music, since we feel like we're right thrust into the middle of it so quickly in September. But that's awesome. Really happy about the episode and the opportunity. So
Yes.
yeah, it was all good. It's been all good.
Yay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course.
Okay, we'll talk again soon. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.